Hello, thank you for participating in the Personal Financial Disclosure webinar. My name is Melissa Horst, and I'm a legislative liaison with the Office of Policy Initiatives here at the Michigan Department of State. We have a few questions for you before we begin. So I'm going to go ahead and launch this poll. Let's see. So the questions that we have for you are just to help us to become a little bit familiar with your situation and what brings you here. Your familiarity with My Login. You will need a citizen, not a business My Login account in order to file. We're also curious about the browser you're using, since some of the technical issues our team is seeing are related to the filer's browser of choice. So knowing what browser you're working with is going to help us troubleshoot your questions. Before we begin, I'd like to go through some housekeeping issues. This is a webinar, so attendee mics are muted and the event is being recorded. You can submit your questions to the Q&A, not the chat. The Q&A is just a helpful tool that helps us organize and track questions, and they can also be viewed by all of you attendees in the audience today, because if you see your question already in the Q&A, go ahead and upvote it. That'll help us identify those questions that are impacting a broader group of people. If you don't see a question you submitted, don't fret. It is likely under the answered tab. If we don't get to your question, or if your question is unique to your specific circumstances, please email us at mdos-financialdisclosure@michigan.gov. We only have 1 hour and we're going to get to as many questions as we can, but please don't hesitate to contact us after the event. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Hopefully that gave you enough time to respond, and hand things off to Heidi Zabik, who will introduce you to today's training. Heidi?
All right. Well, thank you, Melissa. And thank you all for joining us today. We're really excited to roll out this new program to everyone in the state who is running for office or currently serving in the seats that are required to file. So today's topics, we're going to start with an overview of this process and make sure that you've got an idea of what the system is and who must file and the process that you will use for preparing, completing, and submitting your filings. After that, we're going to go into a demonstration of the platforms and launch the software itself. And my colleague, Bob Burns, is going to take us through that. He'll show you how to create your login account, how to register as a first-time filer, how to complete and certify your forms, and then how those forms will look to the public. And then when we're done, we'll talk a little bit about what happens after you file, and then get straight to the Q&A, which I know a lot of you are very interested in, and we want to leave time for. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So first off, the only people subject to PFD filings are currently serving officials for one of the above seats, plus any candidate for those seats. The filing deadline for the public officials is already passed, so today's training is going to focus on what candidates need to know, and we will not be spending time on items unless they are relevant to candidates and their filings. It is very likely that you are, some of you are unsure right now whether you need to file in the first place. So we are going to go through the criteria of who must file as it is written in the Public Act 282, the Candidate for Office Personal Financial Disclosure Act. This is the only criteria that the BOE has to use in interpreting the act. So we're going to step through it. You must file if you are a candidate for office, and that is a defined term in the act. There are 4 components to it, and we're going to break each part of these into 4 separate questions. And you can pretty much just go through and ask yourself. And to make sure that you hit that definition. If you must answer yes to these 4 questions, then you must file a PFD statement. So let's step through each of these. Question number 1. Do you meet the definition of a candidate according to the Michigan Campaign Finance Act? So that means, have you filed a fee or a nominating petition for an elective office? Have you been nominated and certified by a political party caucus as at the convention as the nominated candidate for that elective office? Have you received a contribution or made an expenditure to further your election or nomination? Have you given consent to someone else to receive or spend money to help further your nomination? So these last 2 criteria on here, they're in smaller print than the others. Those are not going to be relevant to candidates. They only apply to current office holders who are term limited or subject to recall. So if you need more info, email us. We'll talk to you about that. The key things to note here on this page is for question number 1 is, if you have done any of those things, filed the fee, the affidavit of incumbency, the nominating petition, and received a contribution at any point in time, you have your candidate committee established already, then you are a candidate under MICFA. And if your committee is still open, then you will continue to be a candidate as far as MICFA is concerned. You will continue to meet that definition as long as your committee remains in place and you are eligible to run for that seat. So in other words, once a candidate, always a candidate until you dissolve your committee. So question number 2, this is the easiest of all of them. And the fact that you're on this webinar today means it's probably a yes for you. If you're running for any of those seats listed on this screen, you must file. If you have previously run for any of these seats and you still have a candidate committee open, then you might need to file. And that leads us to our segue of question number 4. And hold on, I forgot to, did I advance my screen right? Hold on, I think I've got this. Are you subject? Oh, yeah, that was the candidate committee. I'm sorry, I forgot to. So just, I want to really quick here. You're a candidate under MICFA for question number 1. You are running for office of one of these seats for question number 2. Question number 3, you are currently subject to MICFA. This is where you have the open candidate committee. So even if your committee was formed for a previous campaign. Question number 4, has your candidate committee received or expended $1,000 or more during this election cycle? The election cycle for all candidates begins on November 9th of 2022. It was the day after the 2022 November election. So you need to look at your candidate committee and its financial activity and see if the committee spent or received $1,000 or more since that date. And remember that the PFD Act is a separate entity, a separate act, and it has its own rules. So the connection between PFD is in the definitions. Okay, so if you meet those definitions, yes, but if once you are a candidate under MICFA, then you have to consider this 4th question, which is not tied to reporting waivers or it falls under its own. And so when to file? All candidates' PFD statements are due on Wednesday, May 15th. Unless you are a convention nominee who has not already filed the candidate committee prior to May 15th. Then in that case, you will file once you have formed your committee. You will have 15 days in which to file your candidate committee after you are nominated. So then where you file. So you're going to file online. And per the acts, all filers must use the PFD forms as created by the Department of State. Paper filings cannot be submitted. You'll complete all of the needed steps for PFD online inside our new electronic filing system, which is called Michigan Transparency Network, and we pronounce it MiTN. And for 2024, we've developed a base version of the MiTN PFD module. But keep in mind that we did only have 7 weeks when we designed this from inception to rollout. So it's not what we consider to be the final version. But you will be seeing some more robust version come out in future years. MiTN is all web-based software platforms, so there's nothing for filers and users to download or install. And this means that the PFD filings that you're about to submit are going to be the kickoff of this new online system. And the Michigan Transparency Network will continue to house additional modules that are all part of the Bureau of Elections disclosure network. So you will see in the future campaign finance reporting, lobby reporting, legal defense funds, casino interest registrations, and like I said, the more robust version of the PFD filings. So once all of the modules are fully integrated and released, which will be at the end of 2024 or mid 2025, the PFD module will work on all devices and browsers. Right now, it works on virtually all devices and browsers except for mobile phones, but it will in the future. But keep that in mind. You should not be trying to do this on your mobile device. So what types of information need to be disclosed? First, let's also address the reporting window for which you're disclosing. The window is going to cover the calendar year of 2023. So that is going to be for any of your personal financial information that is required to be disclosed according to the Act, but you're going to only look at it for like that income and the employment and the assets and whatnot that occurred in 2023 for this year. Okay, so it'll always be the calendar year preceding the year you are filing. The software has a very routine way of stepping you through the different disclosure forms. There will be a very obvious pattern to it, and the flow from field to field is going to get very familiar and make it easy for you to complete your reports. Most of the disclosure fields are mandatory, and those are fields that are required specifically by the acts or necessary to ensure that the required information can be understood and enforced. There's also some optional fields within MiTN, which are provided in accordance with sections 1 of the acts to provide that expectation of transparency on financial matters. And filers are encouraged to provide additional disclosure to inform the public of any conflicts of interest. And it's also where you can provide additional information on how you may have resolved a conflict of interest. And while any information that is disclosed must be accurate, there is no statutory or constitutional requirement that you provide information specifically for those optional fields. They will be clearly marked with a distinct red outline around the field, and it'll have the word optional written next to it. So for first-time users, there's a couple of setup things that you'll need to take care of before you get into the module itself. So it would be best if you could start by reading the PFD manual that is on our website. And Alec has put that up already. And be sure to bookmark that and return to it as often as needed. I guarantee that that was going to answer nearly all of your how-to questions, and even a lot of like, what does this field mean? That information is all in there, and it's a great place to start in getting yourself familiar with this. So I would recommend that you also begin right at the My Login information, which is also in the manual. And it will take you through step by step what Bob is going to show you today, so that it's not the last opportunity that you have to, see how to get in there. Okay, so be sure to bookmark that manual. So to access MiTN, you need to first have a My Login account. If you don't already have one, you need to set it up. My Login is the state of Michigan centralized identity management solution that allows users the ability to access state services and systems online across multiple state agencies. And you do it with a single user ID and password that you sign in with. And then once you are in there, then you can access the myriad of systems within state of Michigan government. You may have already even used it and not realized that it's called My Login. But it might be for if you've renewed your driver's license or your plate tabs online, or you've applied for unemployment or a bridge card, or gone to Michigan Treasury online. Those are all examples of things you may already have done, and that you may already have a My Login account. So if you are also a state employee, please be aware you cannot use your My Login for workers account. It will not work. There's a separate My Login for citizens login that you need to use. So, and you can have a My Login for worker and a My Login for citizen. Those that lots of people have. I have both. I think almost all state employees have both. So once you get into My Login, then you will access the MiTN software from there. Okay. And at that point, I'm going to let Bob take over so that he can show you the ins and outs of it all. But keep in mind that BOE does not design or support the My Login software directly. So that has to be done through the DTMB website, if you're their help desk, if you have any concerns or questions, or if you're having any difficulty, you're going to need to go through their help desk. And this information is in our manual. Okay. And I have noticed that My Login does not put their phone number on their webpage, but they sure do have it available. If you go to our PFD manual online, you can get help either via online help or phone help. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bob.
Actually, while Bob's getting set up, Heidi, we did have
Mhm,
two clarifying questions come in from the audience.
mhm.
One question from Donald: if you are self-funding only, must you still file a report?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, Donald. And you know what? I should have actually mentioned that, and I didn't. So thank you. Um, Contributions to a candidate committee are a contribution, even if they are coming from you. So there is no designation inside of the PFD Act that even limits any type of receipt or for that matter, expenditure that a committee has made. If it's over $1,000, then you have to disclose whether it is $1,000 that you received by donating it yourself, if it's $1,000 or more that you received from a donor, if it's $1,000 or more that you received, maybe you're a former candidate who ran in a previous election and still have your candidate committee open, and you had receipts come in after the election that would qualify as part of this election cycle. There's a possibility that you need to file, and and that's why we broke it out into those 4 questions. But yes, if you self-fund, you need to consider that a receipt under the PFD Act.
All right, great.
Yeah.
All right, Bob, are you ready to go?
I am. Thank you very much. So again, I'm Bob Burns. I'm the director of the Filing, Disclosure, and Compliance Division here at the Bureau of Elections. We handle campaign finance, lobby reporting, many other duties, including filing for office and petitions. And now we have the honor of implementing the personal financial disclosure requirements that have recently been enacted. So as Heidi finished up, she was talking about MyLogin, the state system that everybody uses to get help or get services from the state of Michigan. As Heidi mentioned, there is a hotline that's run by DTMB that can help you with that. Sometimes we can help you with some basic issues, but they are definitely best suited to help you with problems, especially if they have to do like a password reset or something. They have the capability of doing that. But I would like to start you off in how to set up your MyLogin dashboard after you've signed into MyLogin. I think that'll help a few people get rolling. What you see on the screen right now is one of my personal MyLogin dashboards. And under the welcome, you see that it's got a few of the services that I utilize here at the state of Michigan. And those are quick links to those applications. And we're going to add a link for personal financial disclosure, or MiTN, to that dashboard now so that you can come back to it every time. So the first time a filer visits this MyLogin home screen, they'll add that link on the dashboard. To do so, the first thing you need to do is find the Find Services button on the right where I've circled it right there. After you click on that, you're going to come to the Discover Online Services page. And you're going to go down to the Michigan Secretary of State filter and check the box right here for Michigan Secretary of State options. After you click on that, you're going to type up in the search bar, My Transparency Network, which is the long version of course, MiTN. Once you type that in, where you see the search information to the right that's circled in red, that's where you're going to see the My Transparency Network and Personal Financial Disclosure link or application shown there. Then you are going to read the terms and conditions and click Add Service. And your welcome screen will now look like what you see it on the screen now, which is Personal Financial Disclosure application under your welcome screen. You will not have to do those steps twice. Once you've added that quick link to your welcome screen, it will remain there. So the next thing I'm going to do is demonstrate a few parts of the MiTN system, including registration, as well as typing some data into the disclosure portion of it. But before I get going on that, I just wanted to point out a few user roles that you'll notice. Public officials and candidates who are actually filing their information are called a filer in the system. They're the person who, under their MyLogin, can file reports, type in their data, amend existing reports, and so forth. And you can the filer is the person who can certify that the report is complete and accurate. And they have to do it while logged in under their own MyLogin. But you can also add a preparer to help you put in data. This could be like an accountant or just an assistant. Some people have their spouses as their preparers. And they have a more limited role. They can type in data, but under their MyLog, they cannot certify a report. They cannot submit an amendment or anything like that. But it's definitely helpful to do so. And I'll show you how we're going to go about that. So the next thing on your screen you will see is an example of the registration screen or entering the registration. This is the first thing you're going to see once you get past the My Login. Once you've added that quick link to your My Login dashboard, you click on that quick link and this is what you'll see. But on this, you see a button that says complete registration. And on this, it says my registration is in progress. This is because I've started putting in some sample data for you, but instead of complete registration, you'll probably see begin registration for that button, but it does the same thing to get us started. This is the button right there. So now I'm going to toggle over to our test environment, which is essentially a copy of the MiTN system that allows me to move around in it a little bit and input data without causing problems in the actual system. So just giving me a moment and I will switch over. All right. So now I am sharing the screen of the MiTN test system. As you can see, it says, welcome back, Robert Burns. And it says that my disclosures are in progress. If you haven't done anything, your disclosure will not say in progress. I've just, like I said, put some sample data in there so you can see it. And you'll see the identifying information in there because I've put some of that data in. When you first start, you'll start your registration and go to a screen that looks a lot like this. Hold on, I think I need to log out and log in, and one moment, please. Okay. All right, so when you begin your registration, you will start on this screen. As you see at the top, there's what we call a subway line, which is basically a progress bar that'll guide you through the registration process. There is also a similar subway bar in the actual disclosure system that will show you every step of the disclosures that need to be done. As you can see here, I've put in my name, Robert Burns. The first and last name is automatically filled from your My Login information, but the rest of the information needs to be added in. As Heidi was talking about, there's mandatory information, which is shown in white, and there's optional information, which has got that yellowish tan look and is marked optional with a red circle around it, or red square around it. So you're just going to type in all the necessary information that pertains to you. You can put in your spouse information because there is some limited spousal information that needs to be disclosed in the system. Once you input your system, or input your information, you're going to hit save and next. As you can see, it went from personal information to current public office holders on the subway line. In this case, you can put, if you are an office holder, and I think most of the folks who are listening today are candidates, you can choose whichever applies to you. In this case, I'm going to choose candidate. It asks me for what I'm running for. I'm actually going to say state senator in this case. I'm going to choose the district I'm running for, and then I'm going to hit save and next. And it goes to the next stop on the subway line. This is elected office information. This asks for information. When did I take office, whether I was holding office last year or not. In this case, I'm going to say this is my first time running for office. I did not hold office last year. And just for your information, the reason we ask for some of this is to help people determine if maybe they did not have to report, but in most cases, people who get this farther most likely will. But this information helps us determine some of that. And hit save and next. The registration confirmation does two things. One, it gives me an opportunity to put in a preparer information, their name and so forth, and if they have a title. These are actually all marked optional, and you'll see on your screen they actually show up in yellow. In my test environment, they do not, but they are all optional information. Now, the one thing on this screen that's not optional is the certification, and that's this checkbox that I'm clicking right now. This is certifying that all the information I provided on all the previous registration pages is accurate. So I clicked on that, I hit submit, and now my identifying information is shown on this summary, which you'll see after you complete or at least partially complete your registration. So now I'm going to demonstrate a few of the pages on the actual disclosure page. As you saw, it says I'm 8% complete. I'm just going to walk through a little bit of that right now. I'm going to click on continue disclosures. And again, it's bringing up a new subway line with each of the main segments. There's 12 or 13, depending on your situation, which will have to be reported on. In this case, you'll see there's sources of unearned income, positions in government, your spouse's lobby activity, and so forth. But I'm going to just do some employer information and earned income. And it was what I just did to go back to this. I clicked actually on the subway line, which helped me navigate back to this item. So as you look at the employers and sources of earned income, at the very top, it shows all the disclosures you may have previously put in. In my case, I said that I was a direct employee of St. Mason, attorney at law in New York City. And as I scroll to the right, it shows the additional information. I can edit it. I can actually delete it. You may have seen that it won't let me actually do any changes right now because I need to scroll down and unclick this attestation at the bottom. Now I can amend this information and I can add in additional disclosures, such as additional employment or additional sources of earned income. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So maybe I'm a contract worker on the side. I do a little bit of extra work. I may continue doing that while I'm a state legislator. I may be doing that as a candidate. So in this case, I'm going to choose myself in this case. Now you can see in the drop-down menu, it also says spouse, because there's some limited spousal information that is required to be reported in the system and in accordance with the acts. But in this case, I'm just going to choose myself. I'm going to say I'm a independent contractor. I actually work for a company called BOE Data Systems. As you can see, I previously typed that in. It does remember your information. I was an analyst. I was actually a supervisor there as well. So I'm going to type that information in my position held. And now I come to my first piece of optional information. You know, I'm not required by the statute to put in my income. But since this is such a small amount of income, I want to make it clear to people who might read my report that this is not a conflict of interest. In fact, last year, I only made $500 in my contract work of this. So I'm going to go and put that in there. So there's additional information, the employer's address that needs to be put in, whether I left that or not, which is an optional item. I'm going to say yes. I could say yes to that and then put in the date of when I left. And then I've completed everything that I need to complete on this page. Now, here's the important part, and it applies to each step on the subway line. When I type in this information, before I move on, I have to type or press Save Employer Source of Earned Income. So I click that, and as you can see, that independent contract work is now at the top of my screen. And so it has saved it into the system. Now that I'm done with that, these are my only two employers I need to disclose. I'm going to re-click this attestation at the bottom saying I attest this information to be true and accurate. And now I can hit the save and next. And that means I've saved all my employment information and I've moved on to the next stop in the subway line, which is unearned income. I'm just going to speed through a couple of these right now so I can show you a few other stops. I'm going to stop here at positions in organizations. A lot of folks are wondering what that is. My example here might be that I serve on the board of directors for an educational institution called the Detroit College of Medicine, which I think was the original name of Wayne State. If I was on some other type of board for my neighborhood or something like that, I may want to disclose that here as well. But in this case, I have nothing else to disclose, so I'm going to attest to that and move on to the next item. Now, I'd like to demonstrate also, what if I don't have any disclosures on one of these subway line stops or these categories? For instance, maybe I rent my home, I don't own any real property, so I don't have anything to disclose. In fact, when you first get to here, it says no disclosures under real property, and I'm not going to disclose anything. So I'm going to scroll down and you'll see instead of the attestation saying I'm done, it says I do not have any real property to disclose. So I'm going to click on that and hit save and next. So I'm going to now go through a few of these steps here so I can show you how to review and certify each of the areas, or the entire report, excuse me. And I'll show you in a moment why I have to attest to each of those. Okay, when you get done with each stop on the subway line, either adding in information or attesting that you have none, you will come to the review and certification. And I want to note that as I was saving those items, it was not placing that information on the web. It was just storing that into my account. But when I get done with the certification, everything will be posted to the web as I've submitted it. But it's given me a chance to review everything I've put in there. So my employer and sources of earned income, sources of unearned income, which I have none, organizations, liabilities, everything. At the bottom, it says, it's giving me a warning. It says, disclosures requiring attestation is the liabilities. I didn't put in any mortgage or anything, and I did not attest that I had none. So I'm going to click on that link. It'll help me go back. I look down and I have failed to attest to that. I'm hit save and next. And now I'm going to go back up to the subway line and click on review and certification. It's going to jump me back. I can re-review everything I've put in by scrolling down. It doesn't give me any warnings that I've missed anything, but it does give me this certification. And this certification is included in the statute. We're required to put it on there. This is certifying that everything that I've put in the system is true, etc. I click on that, and now when I hit this submit button, if I was in the actual system, it would be placed my full report on the web. And as you can see, it says PFD status, disclosures submitted in green. And it shows all the information I've previously submitted. If I had to go back and amend this, I could click on amend and make a change. And just to note, when you do make an amendment, it doesn't overwrite your old information. It just completes an all new report into the system. It also shows all my identifying information I previously put in and my amending information. Now, the one thing I didn't tell you about in the beginning is how to add a preparer to help you submit your information. As you may remember, there was some optional information. I could put their name in there, but I did not give them access to the system yet. You give them access to your report right here by typing in their email address into this box here. You use their email that's associated with their My Login. You would type in the email there, type authorize, and they would get an email with a link giving them access to your reports so they can help you amend. Once I add somebody under the disclosures, their email address will also show up on here so you can remember who has access to your information. So with that, I think that is my full demonstration on certification, registration, and inputting the information. And I am going to hand it back over to Heidi, who will wrap us up, and then we'll move back to Q&A. Heidi, if you're up, I think you are muted.
Ah, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay. Um, and I want this. Okay, so after you have filed, you can congratulations when you're done filing. You will have just a couple of things that you want to keep in mind as you are moving beyond. There, you want to keep an eye out for any correspondence that can come in from the Department of or from the Bureau of Elections. We may have potential like error and omission notices or things that we ask you to clarify or correct. And in those instances, you'll just get a letter from us asking, and it'll very clearly state what it is that you should do to to comply. And be sure to reach out to us if you have any questions on those. Also public officers who are not re-elected or seeking re-election will have, and I don't know if that applies to any of you on this because it's public officer related. But you'll have some requirements around employment agreements and things like that. But after the election is over, and if you win your race, congratulations, and you will be hearing more information from us about this. So this won't, but just keep in the back of your mind that there may be some additional requirements that we will go over with you at a later point in time. And then the only other big thing is to keep in mind that you could have future reports that would be due annually each May 15th. Then the other thing also is what happens after you file. I just want to touch upon a couple of things there. So like I said, we're going to review the reports, and if we see any obvious error and omissions, you may hear from us. There are potential penalties for non-compliance, but that would be if you fail to file on time, or if you just don't file at all. And there's also the possibility of complaints, and it might be that you are filing the complaint against an opponent, or a citizen is filing a complaint against you or an opponent. But there is a complaint process out there, and this is also in our PFD manual. If you can't tell, I really like our PFD manual, and I really encourage all of you to use it to its fullest extent because it's going to answer so many questions. So if you do end up having to know more about our complaint process, please go right there in table of contents. You can click on the item. It'll take you straight to that spot in the manual, and you can read more about it, whether you're the complainant or the complaintee. And on that same line, there's also, but it's not related to complaints at all. It's just like a bureaucratic process that can be really important and helpful for you to know about. And that is our declaratory rulings and interpretive statements. As you know, this is new law, and we've said it as well that, this is, has not even been amended once yet by the legislature. So we're all still figuring out the language and what it all means. And as time goes by, we are likely to receive requests from filers and from the public for declaratory rulings and interpretive statements. And this is part of how law gets clarified. We encourage it, and we welcome it for that matter. We really want people to, if you have a question and it is more specific than what the act lays out, then that would be a great opportunity to request a declaratory ruling or an interpretive statement from the Department of State. And it is a process that does take some time, but you would want to go again to our PFD manual. And I have this one memorized. It's on page 27. And you go there, it explains what you need to do, and you can request one yourself. And it is going to be part of the process. And like I said, we invite it, we encourage it. And then with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the presentation side of things. And we're going to just make sure your questions get answered and see what's on your guys' mind. Melissa, is there anything you want to kick us off with question-wise, or something you feel we should dig into a little more?
Yeah, so we actually do have some questions from the audience. So we do have, it sounds like some retirees in the audience. So there's a couple of questions just sort of related to the unique income of pensioners. So in terms of so if you are a retiree, like what do you put down for the employer info? And then is pension income reportable?
I can try to jump on that, or both questions actually. If you're retired, you don't have to put your employer information in there unless you were employed prior to retirement sometime in 2003. And 2003, calendar year 2003 specifically, is the reporting year for your reports due this May. So you would have to put that if you retired. If you retired prior to that, you would not have to include that as an employer. But pursuant to Ms. Trombley's question, she asked if pension income was reportable. Most likely, yes, it would be reported as unearned income as a retirement, as your retirement. So you would record the source of that or that income.
Great, thank you, Bob. And we do have a question from Therese Darling. And she is curious about property. And I think this is actually a timing question, right? But feel free to clarify if I have that wrong. So do you have to list your property if you're buying your home? So I'm assuming that this is referring to sort of assets, liabilities happening now.
Yeah, I'm going to answer it in a few different ways just to make sure
Okay.
we capture that person's information. If you have not yet bought the home, or you did not buy the home in 2023, you do not have to report it as real estate owned. If you are saying that you are buying it like through a mortgage, yes, that's your home. You own it, even though the bank might own the majority of the banks often own our homes most of the time. You would have to report that as your real estate. And then you would also report the loan for that home as a liability. I hope I answered that question from a couple different angles to help out.
Great. And there is a question that I kind of wanted to just maybe clarify, and that we're getting from Randy, and it seems like we're talking about maybe two different time periods, right? So we're talking about what the information that you're putting on your personal financial disclosure versus the time period that would be, mean you've answered yes to being a candidate As to Heidi's point, the 4 questions that you need to answer yes to determine whether or not you need to file a PFD. So Heidi, to Randy's questions, talking about the campaign, right? And maybe to back up, like let's just say hypothetically, you know, I'm a candidate, but I really haven't started like raising money, spending money on my campaign for later this year. So I haven't hit that $1,000 threshold yet for this election cycle. You know, what am I doing in regards to May 15th?
Sure. And yeah, this is coming up a lot because not everyone has formed their committees back in 2023. And so, you know, and to be honest, the act is silent on whether on the timing when it comes to a candidate committee in terms of when you become a candidate in 2024. But what it is it's only for those who have formed in like in 2024 after the May 15th deadline, you know, like in that window where it's this, you know, at the tail end. If you formed your committee in 2023, you are absolutely considered a candidate under the act, for sure. Unless, and you can be, so I'm going to address the timing. So yeah, we need to step back. There's the timing involved with when you became a candidate. And then there's separate from that, the timing of if and when you meet the threshold of $1,000. Okay, those are entirely separate from each other. So when you became a candidate, there are folks who became a candidate many years ago, and they still have an open committee. There are some candidates who maybe were term limited and are no longer term limited, and they still have an active committee, but they're not on the ballot here in 2024. There could be committees that were unable to close out or dissolve, but they don't plan on running again. The fact that their candidate committee is open and that they had a candidate committee in 2023, that's the timeline that you need to be thinking about in terms of, are you a candidate? And that was why I was saying that once you have a committee, you remain a candidate, even when you are not on the ballot. So you can't tie the timing of when you file to run for office to when you formed your committee. Okay, those don't link up in the acts, and it's comparing apples and oranges. So you need to look at whether you meet that definition or not. But that question number 4 that deals with the threshold, that asks you an entirely separate question that is on its own timeline. And it has its own window of time to consider, okay? And that is, did you receive or expend $1,000 or more during this election cycle? It's not a case of 2023 or 2024 or when you filed to run for office, when you turned in petitions, none of that. It is based on the election cycle. So that is a defined term in statute. And the election cycle for every candidate who is affected by this act began on one day, November 9th of 2022. So if you had a candidate committee or you were raising money, maybe you didn't know you had to file a candidate committee, but you accepted money. That would still, if you had to have a candidate committee, whether you did or not, but if you have $1,000 or more expended or received since that date of the beginning of the election cycle on November 9th of 2022, through now, anytime, whether it was in the end of 2022, whether it was in 2023, whether it was yesterday, you have to consider it all cumulatively. Okay, so in that number 4, when you're trying to answer yes or no, it's literally sitting down with a calendar and a calculator. And you're looking at the dates between November 9th of 22 through now. And then you're adding up any expenses or receipts. And it's not even certain types of receipts, it's any receipt. Because the act doesn't delineate any difference between a contribution or a refund you received.
So, and Heidi, to clarify, because when you're talking about the $1,000 threshold in the election cycle, it's not just to now, right? Because that election cycle ends on election day, correct?
It does.
Right.
Yeah.
So for folks out there, maybe they're just getting their campaign going, haven't really started spending the money, haven't started raising the money quite yet.
Right.
But they anticipate that they'll hit that threshold over the next couple of months. They should file by May 15th, their personal financial disclosure by May 15th, correct?
Here's what we're saying to people. Because the act does not give specific instruction for that specific of a scenario, but it does say that you need to file by May 15th if you are a candidate and so think about it through that front page of the newspaper test. Okay. Let's say that a candidate decides that they're not going to file because they didn't spend any money before May 15th, but they hold a huge fundraiser, in June. And or let's say they didn't plan on spending any money, but they got a contribution anyway, because people, they do that. Or let's say you planned on self-funding and then later realized that that counts as a contribution. There are so many scenarios that you could end up sideways where someone's going to file a complaint against you, or it could be your opponent, we don't know how that section of law is going to get fleshed out. But I would imagine that there are very few of you that want to be that guinea pig and be the test case for how it will all end up getting resolved once it's gone to a formal complaint. And eventually it will. So the intent of the law is that if you're running in 2024, that you need to file. So that is where it leans. That's where it looks like it's going. And the arguments can be made multiple ways. You can parse it apart. But if you want to be on the safe side, we would highly recommend that you file.
Right. Thanks, Heidi. I think that front page of the newspaper test is a good test to keep in mind. I did want to highlight that we did have one question come in through the chat that I just wanted to clarify in terms of do vehicles count as real property? Just in general, real property is considered anything that's is usually affixed to the ground. So, but correct me if I'm wrong, Bob. Vehicles not. Yeah.
You are correct that A vehicle will not be considered real property.
Mhm.
Other types of property are not included, but you may have to include it as an asset, depending on
True.
how it's used.
Yep.
So, and you may, if you have a loan on that car, you may have to report that as a liability. So it's
Good
a good thing to look at.
Good clarification, Bob. And
Yep.
then we do have a question from Cindy. And it's about, are there forms that we are required to file?
The only forms are electronic and what we've shown you today. There's no paper forms, if that's what you're asking. The statute does require filings in our system to be completely electronic. So that's the sole way of doing it.
All right. And with that, Bob, Heidi, I think we've gotten through everybody's questions. Of course,
Excellent.
yeah, if folks have questions that come up after this webinar, feel free to reach out at mdos-financialdisclosure@michigan.gov. But I will pass this over to Heidi and Bob for any last thoughts, closing remarks, and just want to say thank you everybody today for your time.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and good luck. And let us know if you have any questions.
Yeah, and I would just reiterate how much that PFD manual is really amazing. So go check it out and familiarize yourself. And like everyone has said, give us a shout, email us if you need any assistance.